Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to a very hot Helen McGrath, Head of Public Affairs at LLG, and a sizzling Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor. We're also quite warm as well.
Hi, everyone.
Now, it's too hot for messing about today, Dennis, so let's get straight on with your first item before the microphones melt. What's on the agenda?
Well, Helen, do you remember those reports that during the height of the pandemic, government ministers were buying PPE on WhatsApp? Well, the ICO has now strongly been critical of these practices. Here's the detail. The Information Commissioner's Office has just announced a strong reprimand to the Department of Health and Social Care following an investigation into the use of private communication channels such as WhatsApp and personal emails by its ministers and officials during the pandemic. The ICO investigation found that the lack of clear controls and the rapid increase in the use of messaging apps and technologies for official business risked important information on the government's response to the pandemic being lost or insecurely handled. It issued a reprimand to the department under the General Data Protection Regulations, requiring the DHSC to improve its processes and procedures around the handling of personal information through private correspondence channels and ensure that information is kept secure. They said that the storage of government information on outside servers showed a lack of awareness of the risks that external storage and retention of the information could bring. The ICO also issued DHSC with a practice recommendation ordering the department to improve its management of FOI requests and address inconsistencies in its existing FOI guidance to ensure that requests are better managed, particularly in relation to the use of personal accounts. The report concluded that there were real risks to transparency and accountability within government. John Edwards, the Information Commissioner, said, "I understand the value of instant communication that something like WhatsApp can bring. However, the price of using these methods must not result in a lack of transparency and inadequate data security. Public officials should be able to show their workings, both for record-keeping purposes and to maintain public confidence. That is how trust in those decisions is secured and lessons are learned for the future." And of course, those lessons would apply to the use of personal channels in our sector too.
Now, sticking with the ICO, solicitors are being asked to play their part in keeping the UK safe online by helping to tackle the rise in organisations paying out to ransomware criminals. Local authorities, of course, are no stranger to cyber attacks. The National Cyber Security Centre and Information Commissioner's Office have said that some firms are paying ransoms with the expectation that this is the right thing to do, and they do not need to engage with the ICO as a regulator or will gain benefit from it by way of reduced enforcement. This, they say, is incorrect. In a joint letter, NCSC and the ICO asked the Law Society to remind its members that they should not advise clients to pay ransomware demands should they fall victim to a cyber attack. Paying ransoms to release locked data, it says, does not reduce the risk to individuals. It's not an obligation under data protection law, and it's not considered a reasonable step to safeguard data. The ICO has clarified that it will not take this into account as a mitigating factor when considering the type of or scale of enforcement action. It will, however, consider early engagement and cooperation with the NCSC positively when setting its response. The CEO, Lindy Cameron at NCSC, said ransomware remains the biggest online threat to the UK, and we are clear that organisations should not pay ransom funds. Unfortunately, we have seen a recent rise in payments to ransomware criminals, and the legal sector has a vital role to play in helping reverse that trend. Now, the NCSC has a wide range of guidance on mitigating the ransomware threat, and all of its advice can be found on its ransomware portal. The ICO itself recently updated ransomware guidance, which again can be found on its website. Now, in other news, proposals amounting to major reform of the courts and tribunals are in the pipeline. What can you tell us, Dennis?
Yes, indeed. And it's called One Judiciary. and it's an attempt to merge all judges and tribunal panelists into a single organisation to deal with the ever-increasing workload. Here's more on this. The judiciary and the Ministry of Justice have announced plans to remove barriers that prevent judges from hearing different types of cases in a bid to bring both the courts and tribunals together. Announcing the move, the Lord Chancellor, the Lord Chief Justice, and the Senior President of Tribunals said that they wish to unify the courts and tribunals to make better use of resources and to demonstrate that judges sitting in courts or tribunals are part of a single judicial family. The plans, which are part of the One Judiciary scheme, will see the three leaders promote cross-deployment by working towards the creation of a unified leadership structure which will bring the tribunals together with the courts under the leadership of the Lord Chief Justice. Under the reforms, the Senior President of Tribunals would continue to provide leadership for the tribunal system. Speaking more broadly about the scheme's aims, the announcement said that the promotion of cross-deployment will support judges' career development, enabling them to broaden their skills in different areas of the law. It will improve our ability, it said, to deploy judges with the right expertise more flexibly to meet fluctuating caseloads and support the exchange of experience between jurisdictions. The announcement went on, this supports our shared responsibility to provide timely access to justice and continuously to improve the efficiency of the administration of justice. Now, the concept of a unified cohort of judges and tribunals sharing a combined workload sounds like something fine in principle, but not in practice. My cynical side makes me think that this is about making do because of the immense pressures on caseloads that exist at present. To be successful, this One Judiciary initiative will require an immense commitment to training, indeed retraining, for it to operate as intended. Like in so many areas of public service, we simply do not have the right numbers of people to make things work properly.
Now, taken from the LGA Bulletin, the Bureau of Investigative Journalism found earlier this year that of 137 English councils for which it had data, 87 were forecasting a loss on their dedicated schools grants budgets in 21-22, adding to multi-million pound cumulative deficits built up over many years. Extra funding available to the worst hit councils under so-called safety valve agreements with the Department for Education will be expanded to cover 34 councils, with 55 more brought into another, less prescriptive scheme. But a planned change in council accountancy rules from next April will mean councils, particularly those with safety valve deals, will have to show they have enough money in their general reserves to cover the accumulated DSG deficits. The LGA have warned that more money is needed. It said it was good the government provided much needed additional funding to help councils meet the rising demand for support from children and young people with SEND. However, this has fallen short of enabling councils to eliminate high needs deficits. Now, just a note on the schools bill, which is currently in the report stage of the House of Lords. While councils have a statutory duty to ensure there's a school place for every child, they are currently not able to direct academies to expand school places or admit individual pupils. The LGA are seeking a commitment from government to redress this discrepancy between councils' duties and powers as soon as reasonably possible, by providing councils with sufficient backstop powers to direct academies to expand school places and admit individual pupils within 6 months of the Act passing. We will give you more on the schools bill as it happens. Now, Dennis, I wonder, is the heat wave getting to you? What's this about seaside beach huts? Tell us more.
Yes, it's a South Coast thing, really. But where does the film Wall Street come into all of this? Perhaps I ought to explain. Some things, Helen, distinguish the Great North, where I live, from our colleagues in the sultry South. Our culture, the arts, music, and of course the Teesside Parmo. Yes, that famous northern tribute to Viennese haute cuisine. More on that later. But the South has its own eccentricities too. Nowhere in the north of England has those little coloured beach huts that you see in South Coast resorts like Bournemouth, and which are currently causing so much political controversy in the news at the moment. We have previously reported that commercialisation and financial risk-taking seem to be dropping out of fashion, but never before has a council been accused of casino capitalism. Now, back to Bournemouth. Holidaymakers basking in the heatwave are worried about plans by council bosses to cash in by selling these beach huts to boost their budget with a £54 million windfall. These quaint wooden structures are highly sought after, with typical waiting times to take up a long-term rental ranging from 5 to 20 years. The financial scheme proposed by Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council involves selling the huts to a company controlled by the authority on a debt-for-cash basis. The proposed arrangements are facing mounting scrutiny, with questions being raised both in Parliament and locally. The scheme has been described as the worst kind of casino capitalism, and apparently people are appalled by it. One councillor describing it as the sort of thing devised by Gordon Gekko, the anti-hero in the 1987 hit film Wall Street. If you remember that film, then you'll remember the line, "Lunch? Lunch is for wimps." And that neatly brings me back to my earlier reference to that northern delicacy, the Teesside Parmo. Are you still curious? Then drop me a line. But a big thank you to the people of Middlesbrough for inventing it.
Well, Dennis, you're certainly on fine form this morning and have given us plenty of food for thought there. And finally, before I lapse into more bad jokes, on a very serious note indeed. Last Thursday was the deadline to submit a response to the government's consultation on the proposed changes to the Mental Capacity Act Code of Practice and implementation of liberty protection safeguards, including the Liberty Protection Safeguards secondary legislation. Now, LLG supports the government's intention to revise the process of DOLS and the MCA Code of Practice to address the backlogs and ensure that appropriate safeguards are in place to ensure rights are not breached, not least because of the impact on safeguards throughout the pandemic and ongoing continual effect. However, we do remain concerned that the proposals might debile that intention and erode safeguards further. The biggest concern, and there are a few, centres around what appears to be a redefinition of deprivation of liberty within the code. Some examples in the code illustrating what a deprivation of liberty is and is not, at Chapter 12, are concerning, especially around continuous supervision and control. Whilst the examples used do meet the test set out in the case of Cheshire West, they are nevertheless illustrated as not meeting the test. The case law examples are out of context. If the acid test by Lady Hale, as set out in Cheshire West, is not followed, this could lead to speculation and deviation from binding Supreme Court case law. The examples need to be reconsidered to avoid the perception that the code is overhauling established Supreme Court precedent and in places reverting back to the appeal court findings. The Code of Practice also does not deal with recent important case law, such as the Supreme Court decision in JB. As a consultation, we are disappointed with the time and effort needed to digest and respond to the consultation, given that the code runs to 518 pages. In addition, there are not many questions in the consultation which enabled dissent with the proposals, rather seeking only to know if they are clear. The government's utilisation of a limited maximum word count very much restricted the freedom to appropriately address some of the issues in the code. Overall, the code would benefit from redrafting in places. For example, there are references to regulations which are not part of the consultation. There's numerous typos and sections which do not follow in order. Given the delay to the consultation, this was exceptionally unfortunate. LLG's word-restricted response and a breakdown of the main proposals are available on the resources page of our website. And I must give a huge shout out here to Emma Harrison, our amazing adult social care and health national lead, for the huge amount of work she put into this at her own authority of Devon, and for her work with LLG. And indeed, you can catch Emma on demand in a bespoke webinar from Nexus and local government lawyer on the latter's website, or catch up on her latest national lead meeting on our website. And on that note, that's it for another edition of the podcast. You can read more on the items discussed today and many more besides by going to bulletin number 26, available on the LLG website now. So it's goodbye from me
And from me too.
Thank you for listening. Take care in the heat and have a good week, everyone.